Which brings me now to my final explanation, and that is, the role of motherhood penalty. So, and this refers back to our last chapter. Work-life balance. There is this conflict between our work and our home lives. And part of that has a lot to do with, in this country, there's this concept of the ideal worker norm. What does it mean to be an ideal worker? That you're someone that's able to, at least during the time you're at work, to fully dedicate and focus your time and energies on your work, to commit to the job for for the long term, to not have any expected, absences or breaks away from the job. And that becomes really hard for women, and particularly for mothers, existing mothers, soon to be mothers, expected mothers. It's hard for them to do this because you've got to take some time away to have your child. And then even once your child exists, there are going to be unexpected things to come up, illnesses, school issues, doctor's appointments. And so all of this means that mothers cannot be the ideal workers. And because they cannot be the ideal workers logistically, and employers see them through this lens of you're not going to be the ideal worker, that means that women face a motherhood penalty. And it says, see the next slide. But I think what I did was I just put my points from the next slide on this slide. Yes. And so the motherhood penalty is the fact that women lose earnings because of employer discrimination. They believe that mothers will be less devoted to their jobs, and therefore they should be paid less, or perhaps not even hired altogether. Although, keep in mind that is illegal. You can't not hire someone because they're a mother. You can possibly pay them less, because there aren't laws that promise equal pay. And so that is the case. Mothers make less money than fathers. And we'll talk about fatherhood premium in a second. Mothers make less money than single women, particularly single women who are too old to have a child. Which is where we sometimes start to see the gender pay gap narrow. And so this preconceived notion that mothers aren't going to be good workers, and I'm not even going to say good workers, I'm going to say that they're not going to be able to uphold that ideal worker norm, it is partially supported by the fact that women do have to take time away from work for their families. Like I said, they have to bear children, if they want to take some time off in their child's early years or, early months even, and then of course, like I said, doctor's appointments, children get sick, there's school issues and unexpected days off. Think about what is happening in 2020 in regards to the pandemic. And so all of this takes away from the time that they're able to dedicate to work, thus making them not ideal. And so modern mothers, they do pay a steep price for having children, while modern fathers generally do not. Because like I said, it is expected that men are going to have children, but it isn't expected that they are going to disrupt their lives to care for them, because that's what their presumed wives are doing. So instead, what we can often see for men is that they will have a fatherhood premium, that they will make a little bit more money, because the expectation is, unlike a single, unattached man who would leave a job, who would quit unexpectedly. The expectation is men are going to be more loyal and more stable to their job when they have mouths to feed and people to take care of. And so the job rewards them. But it rewards them with the expectation that they aren't going to divert a lot of time, energy, and attention away from their job to their families. Because while mothers are automatically put on the mommy track, men are only put on the daddy track if they make it a point to make it clear that they are prioritizing spending time with their family as opposed to spending time on the job. So the mommy track is almost automatic for women. You have you become a mother, and for a lot of companies, it almost is expected that you are now not going to be the ideal worker. If they did have you on a pathway, leading you up to upper middle management, they might take away some of those responsibilities and give them to coworkers who are not mothers. Fathers, because the expectation is to be a good father is just to be a breadwinner. Men who become fathers are not automatically placed on the daddy track. Men who are placed on the daddy track are men who push back against the ideal worker norm expectation by doing things like not coming in on the weekends to work because they're spending time with their families, not staying late at a company event, or wining and dining the clients because they go home to take care of their family, taking time off of work in order to more evenly share childcare responsibilities with their partner. Those men who engage in that type of activity are more apt to then be placed on the daddy track, which is similar to the mommy track, right? You now are no longer being considered for those upper level, better compensated, more powerful positions. Going the wrong way. So have we passed policies to combat this? Very, very little. There are governmental entities like the EEOC, the Equal Employment Opportunity Commission, is supposed to help address issues in discriminatory hiring, but it can be very hard to prove that the reason why you didn't get a job was because of your sex or because of your race or because of your age. Affirmative action, this also was meant to address gender inequity, not just racial inequity in the workplace. And affirmative action it can take a variety of forms. Oftentimes people are thinking about it in terms of quotas, where you set aside positions for people of a specific group. And it's worth noting that these type of set-asides, especially in the world of education, these have been deemed unconstitutional since the 1970s. Bach versus UC Davis was a Supreme Court case for that. So the type of affirmative action programs that are more likely still in existence are preferences and goals. Preferences are everything else being comparably equal. So like, let's say you more or less have a person that has the expertise and skills to have this job, and another person that has the expertise and skills to have this job. Then the preference would be that you give it to the underrepresented, the individual that represents the underrepresented group, whether that's on the basis of gender or the basis of race, ethnicity. Goals is even more or not more, goals are even less concrete. These are companies and schools. This is kind of their stated goal. Like they might say something like, a company might say, we want to increase the women that are part of our middle management employee tier. We want to increase that number by 10%. So it's just kind of putting it out there that that's kind of what they're working towards, but it's not necessarily like a concrete, like we're holding ourselves, to this standard. And it's worth noting that initially white females were the early beneficiaries of affirmative action gender-based policies, both on college campuses as well as in workplaces. And as their numbers began to reach parity with men, especially in colleges, policies then shifted to focus more so on race. But after several successful Supreme Court challenges to using race on the basis as the basis of affirmative action policies, particularly for colleges, there now has been an increasing focus on socioeconomic status. So, preferences and goal programs related to increasing the number of students from poor, working class backgrounds in certain higher education settings. It's worth noting that affirmative action in workplaces, it's been less uniformly practiced and also less systematically challenged. Family-friendly workplace policies. I had this discussion in the last chapter, but it's worth saying again. There is no federally mandated paid maternity leave. This can vary by state. This can vary by company, but there is no federal mandate that says that a company has to offer paid maternity leave to its employees, let alone paid paternity leave. So states and individual businesses can enact their own laws and policies, but there's no federal level legislation. And America is one of the few countries, especially if you're thinking of fully industrialized nations, that lack this type of policy. What we have had since 1993 is the Family and Medical Leave Act. And it provides protected leave, meaning you can't be fired for up to 12 weeks if you have to take time off for yourself or because of family related health issues. This, however, is unpaid. So people's capacity to utilize FMLA is somewhat also related to their ability to withstand not receiving a paycheck for that amount of time. And so in this way, I guess it's better than nothing, but it certainly isn't very helpful to the kind of struggling middle class, working class families out there, who have to decide, do I take unpaid leave if I live in a state where the paid maternity leave isn't offered? Do I take unpaid leave and possibly financially struggle during this time period? Or do I not take the leave? And of course, that raises additional issues around health, around safety of children, around the need for affordable daycare and childcare services. And it's just worth noting, because this is where your book ends, with the new economy, we've spent so long focusing on this gap between men and women in the economy, and women need to catch up with men. Women need to catch up with men. But then what happens when men aren't even doing as well as they used to? Now, of course, it's an even more problematic situation. And so it's just worth noting that there are a lot of current problems in the U.S. workplace. There's the dual labor market, where you have jobs that are part of the primary labor market and, your so-called good jobs with salaries and benefits. And then you have jobs in the secondary market, and these are your minimum wage jobs that lack benefits. There are issues around workplace safety. There's the extent to which workplace alienation is an issue, where people just feel disconnected from their work and on kind of a psychosocial level. The McDonaldization of jobs, where jobs are becoming so routine, that it kind of saps the creativity and the autonomy out of the job. Your book explicitly talks about the rise of temping in the gig economy. It gives people flexibility, but it also takes away financial and job security. And then particularly because it lacks benefits, especially retirement benefits, it raises concerns about, what is this going to look like when people are 60, 70, 80 years old? Are they going to be able to retire? Are we going to have a society where we have a bunch of poor older people? Unemployment, not even post-pandemic, but, courtesy of the pandemic, after experiencing some years of growth after the recession, now we are back to having very high unemployment levels. And really the numbers have been worse than what was even suggested, because a lot of that job growth was low wage recovery, meaning people had jobs, but given their skills, given their education, they are what we call underemployed, and that's never ideal. We've talked about there's institutional discrimination, and job segregation. We focused on it explicitly in regards to gender, but know that also exists in regards to race and ethnicity. And then the decline of unionization has made it harder for workers to organize and demand protection and rights as workers. So, all of this is just to say, women don't have equal rights in the workplace. They're not as successful as men at work. And then just the work arena itself is just kind of going through a real period of crisis. And, I really like the fact that when your book ends on page 354, or when this chapter ends on pages 354 to 355, I love the fact that they say there's this saying, money doesn't buy happiness. So why focus on it? Well, that's because it buys everything else except maybe happiness. So it has to be a focus in society, particularly a capitalist society. And that's why the gender pay gap matters, because it may not buy happiness, but it does impact things like your ability to pay for education, to take care of your children, to own your own home, to build, your wealth portfolio, to be able to retire comfortably. So it does matter. And that is the end of chapter 12 on work.